안녕하십니까. 지금
Good morning. We would now like to commence the KEI session of the 2021 Global Korea Convention. This session is titled Green Transition and International Cooperation. We will take a look at the adaptation and mitigation of climate change by various countries in the post-COVID-19 era, and we would like to take this opportunity to search for ways to achieve the visions set by the convention. This session is being held by KEI titled Green Transition and International Cooperation. We will be hosting the session from 10 o'clock until noon. We would like to take this opportunity to thank the participation of the speakers and discussants both online and offline, as well as our audience who have joined us offline and online. I will be taking you throughout the opening ceremony. I am Lee Hyun-woo of KEI. Pleased to meet you. The opening ceremony will start with the opening remarks by President Yoon Jae-yong of KEI, followed by the welcoming remarks by former Minister of Environment, Mr. Cho Myung-lee. He will be providing us with the recorded version of his remarks. We would first like to invite President Yoon Jae-yong to the podium. Good morning. As have been introduced, I am Yoon Jae-yong of KEI. May I take off my mask? Maybe some of you are not familiar with the name Korea Environment Institute. Well, we actually had a different name until very recently, but we were renamed as the Korea Environment Institute recently. And so we have settled in with our new name. At the Global Korea Convention Conference, we will be hosting our session titled Green Transformation and International Cooperation. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our distinguished guests from home and abroad, our speakers who have joined us both online and offline, as well as our audience who have joined us in the hall and through YouTube. Due to human activities, we have seen an increase in the emission of greenhouse gases, translating into climate change, which has become a global security issue. As you are well aware, in Glasgow, we had the recent COP26. And during COP26, a few important conclusions were drawn. COP26 is symbolic for international conference and cooperation. There are various perspectives concerning the results of COP26. People from the environmental civic groups have expressed their disappointment at the conclusions from COP26. On the other hand, some people believe that the results of COP26 will make a contribution to finding solutions for climate change, that there have been advancements in the right direction. In order to prevent a climate crisis, the international society signed the 2015 Paris Treaty, and they have adapted the Sdgs in order to mitigate the emission of carbon. And we have also made efforts to transform our societies into a low-carbon green economy. Major countries around the world have joined the goal to reduce global warming through the Paris Treaty, and against the backdrop of an understanding of a new vision, we continue to see that countries are announcing their own goals for net zero policies. Korea has also announced net zero by 2050, and by 2030, which is just 8 years away, we plan to reduce carbon emissions by 40%. This is an upgraded version of our NDC. And such important announcements were made during COP26. The President of the Republic of Korea went in person at COP26 to announce these commitments to the international society, which in itself is very meaningful. In order to achieve the goals of the Paris Treaty, we need to take more bold action for climate. The international society needs to emphasize the environment of the developing countries that are vulnerable to climate change. We also need to provide financial support and technology transfer to the developing countries in order to respond to climate change. We need to reduce carbon emissions, and we need to make sure that we transform our societies into sustainable societies. This can be called with different names, for example, green transformation, or it could be branded in other ways. But nevertheless, the developed countries are already equipped with the financial means and technology to achieve such transformations. However, on the other hand, there are dozens of developing countries who are not equipped with such capabilities. But at the same time, energy and fossil fuels are essential to the development of their economies, and therefore we need to find a way to balance economic and social development while focusing on the environment side. The developing countries, they are not those who actually emitted the carbon that has caused the climate crisis. And so the direction of international cooperation is set, taking all of these factors into consideration. From this aspect, the Republic of Korea, I believe, is playing quite a proactive role. In the 1960s, Korea went through very big economic difficulties. We were amongst the least developed countries. And in just 50 to 60 years, we have joined the OECD, which can be said to be a club of advanced nations. If we take a look at various statistics of Korea, we are on par with the average of OECD in various aspects. And so as a country that went through this development process, we believe that we are in a position to share our experience with others as a country that went through the necessary developments. Around the world, many countries are looking to set their directions for the future. And in the third basic plan for international development cooperation, we have decided to select as one of our goals leading green transformation so that we can lead the way for climate change discussions, strengthen relevant cooperation, and also pursue strategic Green New Deal ODA. So we do have in place plans to strengthen our support for climate change responses by developing countries. At EAI, in line with such government policies, we are continuing our research support. Along with the National Research Council for Economics, Humanities, and Social Sciences, we have created Net Zero Research Agency so that we can conduct a in-depth research and review in order to achieve the 2050 net zero vision. We are continuing to provide research support for these policies. We have also established the Global Green Transformation Network and also operate the Korea-ASEAN Environment Climate Change Roundtable so that we could facilitate the cooperation with stakeholders from around the world and also win the understanding of these policies around the world. If we take a look at the ODA budget for this year, it is about 3 to 4 trillion won larger than before. The global economy is going through a difficult patch, and so there are not many countries that have increased their ODA budget. But as you can see, Korea has increased the ODA budget by a significant amount. And that really reflects Korea's responsibility within the international society and how Korea takes this responsibility very seriously. The activities within the international society through KOICA, we are providing ODA, and we are also providing loans through EDCF, and various ministries are conducting international cooperation projects. So not only have we been able to increase our support quantitatively, but we believe that we are in a position where we need to strengthen our governance so that we can increase the quality of our cooperation as well. Many government ministries, the private sector, and NGOs now need to gather their wisdom in order to contribute to overcoming the climate crisis. That is the issue on our hands. From this aspect, this session, hosted by KEI, will invite the participants and experts from KOICA, the ASEAN Secretariat, and GGGI in order to discuss the tasks and cooperation for green transformation and achieving a global green society. And in line with the vision of this year's Global Korea Convention, we will take a look at ways to strengthen the international leadership of Korea for green transformation, as well as strengthening our presence in the international stage and also on the diplomatic platform. I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank our distinguished guests from home and abroad, as well as our audience, and also the staff of KEI, including Mr. Lee Han-woo, for making this session possible. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Yoon, for your kind words. And next, we have a welcoming and congratulatory remark from the former Minister of Environment, Jo Myung-rae. Here he is in video.
안녕하세요.
Good day.
18대 환경부
I am Jo
장관을
Myung-rae, and I
역임한
served as the
조명래입니다.
18th Minister of
2021년
Environment at the
경제
Global
인문사회
Korea
연구회
Convention
주최
2021.
글로벌 코리아
hosted
박람회
by the National Research
컨퍼런스에서
Council for
KEI
Economics,
주관의
Humanities and Social
녹색 전환과
Sciences,
국제 협력에
KEI
관한
is organizing a
세션이
session
열리게
on
된
green
것을
transition and
진심으로
international
축하드립니다.
cooperation. I offer my heartfelt
오늘 행사를
congratulations.
준비하는데
I
애쓰신
extend my gratitude
윤재용
to President
원장님,
Yoon Jae-yong of
이현우
KEI
박사님,
and Dr. Lee
KEI
Hyun-woo, as well as
관계자분들,
everyone at
그리고 오늘
KEI
발표와
for
토론에
dedicating themselves to
참여하는
preparing this
전문가
event
여러분
and
모두에게
experts
감사한
participating
말씀을
as
드립니다.
presenters and panels.
작년 환경부 장관으로 재임
While
중에
serving as the Minister
박람회
of Environment
개식에서
last year, I
인사말을
delivered an address
하였는데
at the opening
올해도
ceremony of
다시
the
하게 되어
convention. It is an
영광스럽게
honor to do
생각합니다.
so again this year.
저는 2017년,
During my
18년에
tenure as
KEI
the president
원장으로
of the
재임한 바
KEI from
있습니다.
2017 to 2018,
재직 동안
I took a keen
KEI의
interest
국제
in the
협력에 많은
international
관심을 가지고
cooperation of the
여러
institute
사업들을
and pushed
추진하였습니다.
forward various relevant
당시에도
projects.
이현우 박사께서
I was always
중책을
grateful
맡아
to Dr. Lee
KEI
Hyun-woo
국제
at the time
협력에
for assuming the key
혼신을
role
다하는
and
것에
dedicating
대해
himself
늘
to the international
고마워했습니다.
cooperation of KEI.
아직도 같은 일을 하고
Just
있어
as he
든든하기
continues to
그지없습니다.
staunchly do so today.
코로나19를 계기로 전 분야의
COVID-19 has
구조적
accelerated
변화가
structural change in
가속화되고
all
있습니다.
areas.
여기에 기후위기가
Combined
결합되면서
with the climate crisis,
이른바
the so-called
녹색
Great
대전환이
Green Transition
세계적인 하두로
is
떠오르고
emerging as a
있습니다.
global hot topic.
이러한 시점에
At this
KEI가
juncture, the
포스트
KEI
코로나
is
시대
leading a discussion
국가
on
지속
response
가능
measures
발전을
for
위한
sustainable
대응
national
방안을
development in a
논의하면서 정부의 친환경 저탄소
presenting the way
경제로의
forward
전환,
for the government
즉
to achieve
녹색
the
전환을 위한
transition into an
방향을 제시하고
eco-friendly, low-carbon
나아가
economy,
이를
in other
토대로
words, green
국제사회의
transition,
코로나
green
위기
transition.
이후 대비와
Discussions on
개도국
preparing
녹색
the world
전환의
for a
지원 방안을
post-COVID era, as well as
확대하기 위한
measures to support the
논의장을
green
연
transition
것은
of partner
아주
countries are also
시적절하고
taking place in
중요한
this
의미를
timely and
갖는다고 봅니다.
significant venue.
특히 한국 정부의
In particular,
신남방 정책의
This session will
핵심
also
파트너인
address
아시안
cooperation measures on the
국가들과의
environment and
환경
climate
기후 변화
change between the
협력
ROK
방안도
and
논의할
ASEAN
것으로
member
예상되어
states, the
오늘의
core partners
토론회가
in
더욱
our new
빛날 것
southern policy,
같습니다.
adding even
우리
greater
정부는
meaning to
최근
the
들어
discussions today.
P4G
The
정상회의,
ROK government has
아태
recently
환경
hosted
장관
the
포럼 등을
P4G summit
개최하고
and the
그린
Asia-Pacific
뉴딜의 도입,
Environment Ministerial
탄소 중립
meeting
및
and adopted
녹색
the Green New
성장법의
Deal,
제정,
enacted carbon neutrality and green
2050년
growth
탄소 중립
legislations,
시나리오의
confirmed the
확정,
2050 carbon neutrality
2030년
scenario,
NDC
and
목표의
raised its
상향 등을
NDC target for
추진함으로써
2030,
기후위기
thereby
대응 및
stepping up as a
선도국가로
leader in
발돋움하고
climate action.
있습니다. 제가 환경부
It
장관으로
was while I was
재임하고
serving
있는
as
동안
Minister of
주요
Environment that the
정책들의
direction
방향과
and details
내용이
of these key
대개 결정된
policies were
것이어서
determined.
우리
And for
정부의
that,
녹색
I
변신을
am all the more
더욱
delighted
뿌듯하게
at the
여기고
green
있습니다.
transformation of the
기후위기가
ROK government.
전면화되고 있는 시대,
Right when the
녹색
climate
전환은
crisis is looming large,
대한민국의
green transition
변신으로만
must not
끝나선
end
안 될
with the
것입니다.
ROK alone.
녹색
As a
선도국가로서
green leader,
녹색
the
전환의
ROK must see to
글로벌화를
it that
이끌어낸
the green
데까지
transition
나가야
spreads
한다고
globally.
보고 있습니다. 이런 점에서
In this
그린 뉴딜
sense,
ODA
the seminar
전략,
will address
개도국
the Green New
녹색
Deal
전환
ODA
지원
strategy,
협력,
support and
한 아세안
cooperation on the
환경
green
기후 협력
transition of
등을
partner countries
논의하는
and
오늘
ASEAN-ROK
토론회는
environmental and climate
작지만
cooperation.
큰 여운을
This may be a
남길 것
small event,
같습니다.
but it will surely leave a lasting
오늘의
impression.
토론회가 한
I
계기가
hope
되어
today's event
한국
serves as
사회의
an
녹색
opportunity
전환을
for us to
넘어
go beyond the
아시아의
grand
녹색
transition
전환,
of the Korean society
나아가
into that
글로벌
of
녹색
Asia and the
전환으로
world
이어지는
by
미래지향적인
widely opening
길이
up a forward-looking
환히
path.
열리기를 진정으로 기대합니다. 한국환경정책평가연구원이 최근 들어 한국환경연구원으로 이름을 바꾼 것은 KEI가 이런 길을 여는 길라잡이가 되어야 한다는 시대 요구의 반영이라고 생각합니다. 앞으로 이러한 주제의 발표와 토론회 장이 더 자주 열리고 또 이를 계기로 한국환경부, KEI와 코이카, 아세안 사무국 등이 업무 협력을 한층 더 발전시켜 기후위기를 헤쳐나가는 데 더욱 앞장서기를 바랍니다. 오늘 행사에 함께하신 모든 분들께 다시 한번 감사를 드리면서 여러분 모두의 행운과 건승을 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, former Minister Cho Myung-lee, for your remarks. We will now go into our presentations and discussions. We have 3 presenters and also 3 discussants. We will now like to invite the first presentation, who is Dr. An So-eun of KEI. She is in charge of sustainable strategy research. She will present under the policy of policy suggestions for K SDGs in response to COVID-19. Please welcome her with a big round of applause. May I begin? Good morning. I am An So-eun, as have been introduced. It is quite an honor to be invited as a speaker at this session, and thank you very much for your participation at this early hour. Today, I would like to speak under the title of Policy Suggestions for KSDGs in Response to COVID-19. I would like to cover what kind of responses that we have through our policy suggestions. Here is the table of contents, including 3 topics that I will be covering. First, the impact of COVID-19 on SDGs. I am sure that you have already read about these results through various literature. Allow me to review such literature very briefly, and then I would like to go on to the impact of COVID-19 on KSDGs. Well, in 2018, KSDGs have been established, and the subsequent policies were established. I would like to take this opportunity to share with you the expert survey results on the impact of COVID-19 on the 2018 KSDGs. Let me go on to the first part of my presentation, which is the impact of COVID-19 on SDGs. I will not go into the details for this first section because many international organizations and research organizations have published their reports concerning this. So allow me to summarize this part for you. As you're well aware, SDGs were adopted by the UN in 2015 as a follow-up to the Millennium Development Goals. And so the SDGs include 17 goals, and as you can see in the picture, there are 17 policy goals. Well, maybe you can't really hear me well because of the microphone, but I will do my best. Through various reports by international organizations, we have been working on society, economics, environment, and governance. And so many people have talked about the impact of COVID-19 on these sectors. What I would like to present today to you are based on the 2020 UN report. I will not go into the details because you are already well aware of such impacts. And so that is why I have included all of the goals related to society on one slide and economics on another. So here you see all of the impact on society. Next, all of the impact on economics. And then we have the impacts on environment. So what is the impact of COVID-19 on the goals that are related to the environment? And then we have governance. I would like to focus on the second part in my presentation. It is based on an expert survey that we conducted on the impact of COVID-19 on K SDGs. Many people participated in making qualitative forecasts about the impact of COVID-19 because COVID-19 is still ongoing. And so it's very difficult to have accurate figures. And that is why we have designed an expert survey. First, let me share with you the design of the survey. Here is how we designed the expert survey. In order to first discuss how to design it, we conducted a preliminary round of surveys, which led us to 3 decisions. The first is on the survey subject. K SDGs and SDGs are used in our everyday lives, but there are not many people who are aware of the 17 policy goals, and there are not many people who have an accurate understanding of the detailed goals that go into each policy goals. And so when we actually established the K SDGs in 2018, we had 73 people working within the K SDG working group. And that is why we believe that they would be a great group of subject for our survey. And we also changed the format of question to positive and negative effects on each of the targets instead of direct and indirect effects. So we asked about the direction, and we also asked them to use a 7-point scale. So 0 would be neutral, and that would lead to a 7-point scale from -3 to +3. Here you see a detailed view of the questionnaires. So we would first ask the respondents to select the targets and then the degree of impacts. Then the third step would be any additional comments or explanations about their selections in step 1 and 2. We have had 55 people respond out of the 73 experts that we believed would be the right target for this survey. Here is the composition of respondents. On the very left, you can see that the experts within the working group had different areas of expertise. And on the right side, you can see whether these experts were a part of the academia, whether they're at the private sector or at a research institute. So here is the overall composition of respondents, and you can see that 55 people responded to our survey. Now let's take a look at the results of our expert survey. I believe that I should divide the results into 4 different parts to facilitate your understanding. The result of our survey utilized frequency and average, and here's how you read the graph. First, the size of the circle would be the number of respondents who said that these goals have been impacted through the first step, and the average is the average of those who said that there would be a positive impact. That is on the top where it's above the line, and those who said there would be a negative impact are under the line. And you can see that if you use the middle of the circle and you equate that to the y-axis, then you would be able to see the approximate score for each selected goal. So here you can see right here that many people believe that goal 8 would have a negative impact, but on the other hand, related to technology innovation, which is related to goal 9, were the goals that many people believed would receive a positive impact due to COVID-19. Here you can see the societal sector. You can see that overall, the respondents believe that most goals related to social sectors would have a negative impact, especially related to inequality, as well as the quality and availability of education. So here you can see the goals related to inequality, and here you can see the goals related to the quality and availability of education. The positive impacts were on public health as well as prevention and management of infectious diseases. Those were the areas where many people believed would receive a positive impact, that is marked as 3-4 and 3-9. Next is the environmental sector. Well, this part was very difficult to predict because environmental impact was not something that you could see overnight, and there were many points that needed to be reviewed in terms of long-term effect. And that is why we have a mixture of respondents who said that there were positive impacts and negative impacts. I think we have the wrong slide on the screen. Well, I think I will need to go back. So here you can see the goals related to climate change response. It seems that because of COVID-19, we have heightened awareness concerning environmental issues and climate change. And so many believed that COVID-19 has a positive impact in climate change responses. In particular, if we take a look at Goal 15, that is related to land ecosystems, and some people believe that COVID-19 would have a positive impact. If we take a look at land ecosystems, as well as reduction of air pollution, these were some issues that the experts believed would receive a positive impact through COVID-19. But we can see that because of the limitation in mobility, there was an improvement in air quality, but many believe that this would be temporary rather than long-lasting. On the bottom right corner, I have a separate part marked for waste treatment. Well, related to COVID-19, a big issue would be waste treatment, but Waste treatment is related to Goal 12, which is related to sustainable production and consumption, and that is why we took a look at this differently. During COVID-19, we had a lot of waste due to medical waste, food waste, as well as the generation of plastic through packaging. And so this had a very negative impact through COVID-19. We will now take a look at governance, and goal number 17 is related to international cooperation, and many believe that there would be a negative impact on international cooperation as well as development assistance. In order to talk about some policy support, I will continue to share our analysis. I have showed you the 4 graphs, and I would now like to draw some important conclusions from the graphs so that we can group the results together for your convenience. Here you can see there is group 1. I don't have time to explain the basis for the grouping, but we have 3 groups, group 1, 2, and 3. Group 1 are the goals that had the largest impact from COVID-19, followed by group 2 and 3. So all of this information can be found in the 4 graphs that I have shown you before. And you can see that other than 9-3, everything else had a negative impact for economy. And this part is societal sector, which I have already explained, so I will skip over this slide. If you take a look at the environmental sector, 12.5 and 12.9 are related to waste treatment, and so those 2 were the only negative impacts. And you can see that there were positive impacts for many of the other environmental goals, but as I mentioned before, many believe that these positive impacts were temporary. Well, due to the time constraint, I will just mention a few policy suggestions in connection with the expert survey results. In Korea, related to SDGs, we continue to set the Sustainable Development Plan according to our domestic legislation, and we currently have the 4th plan in place, which will last from 2021 to 2040. This was established in 2020, which means that it reflected the changes caused by COVID-19. But we were in the early stages of COVID-19, so the conditions were not fully reflected in the 4th development plan. And so, utilizing the results of the expert survey, as well as the 4th National Sustainable Development Plan, we will have to take a look at whether the policies are appropriate. Within the 4th National Sustainable Development Plan, we can see that there were expressions that explicitly referred to COVID-19 or UNTACT in the plan. And you can take a look at these explicit referrals in this slide. As you can see that Group 1 were the goals with the largest impact due to COVID-19. And as you can see, 8-1, economic growth and support for small-sized businesses, they were actually goals that were directly related to COVID-19. But for the goals that many people believed had indirect impacts of COVID-19, we do not have any specific policies addressing changes related to COVID-19. You can see that they are marked with an X. That doesn't mean that there were no policies related to COVID-19, but it does mean that these policies did not explicitly refer to COVID-19 or UNTACT. If you take a look at the left side, you can see that through our expert survey, we have the grouping of the goals, and the direction of the impact. And on the last column, you can see whether or not COVID-19 related policies were reflected for these specific goals. So please take that into consideration. Well, we should take a deeper look into Group 1. In particular, if there are policies in Group 1 that do not reflect COVID-19, then we should take a deeper look into that so that it will reflect COVID-19. Next, let's take a look at society. So you can see that policies related to COVID-19 were reflected for goals related to infectious diseases. And what does concern me are the goals related to education. The goals related to education always have a large impact on society, and those goals are impacted by different aspects of our society, including inequality. So inequality coupled with COVID-19 will indeed impact the availability and quality of education, and that is why we need to further reflect COVID-19 in policies related to education. In terms of environment, you can see that negative impacts were related to waste treatment. Not only in the 4th National Sustainable Development Plan, but other government plans do deal with waste treatment in various ways. And if you take a look at 12-5 or 12-10, it's all related to waste treatment because it's related to sustainable production and sustainable consumption. And in order to achieve net zero with a circulation economy, we need to supplement these policies related to waste treatment. The biggest positive impact was related to raising awareness. There is heightened awareness concerning the climate crisis as well as environmental issues, and that could be reflected in the policies, which is a positive change. I will not go into details of governance. Many of the experts did not take a deep dive into the details related to goals that would be a part of the governance sector. I think I have about 1 minute left according to the clock that I see in front of me. Having conducted this research within KEI, the original goal was to take a look at the impact of COVID-19. It's very difficult to predict these impacts and also to quantify the impacts. But as I mentioned in the beginning, COVID-19 is still ongoing, and that makes predictions even more difficult. But by conducting an expert survey, we did make an effort to quantify the impact of COVID-19, which differentiates us with other research results. It has to be reflected on domestic policies, but I believe that it has a lot of implications for international cooperation, which is the topic for this session. Those who are in charge of international cooperation probably are very interested in its impact on ODA as well as the future direction for ODA. And I hope that these results could be helpful in finding the new directions for ODA after COVID-19. And I look forward to the policies being strengthened through the results of this survey. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Dr. An.
And next, I would like to invite our second speaker, Director General Lee Yeon-soo of the Department of Climate Crisis and Pandemic Response of KOICA. The presentation will be on Korea's Green New Deal strategy, KOICA's support for the green transition of partner countries.
안녕하십니까.
Hello. I am Lee Yeon-soo from the Department of Climate Crisis and Pandemic Response from KOICA. As introduced, I will be discussing Korea's Green New Deal strategy and KOICA's support for the green transition of partner countries. So this is the order of my presentation. I will start with Korea's Green New Deal ODA strategy, followed by KOICA's midterm strategy on climate action, and KOICA GCF cooperation, achievements and progress. And lastly, I would like to conclude with our future plans. And as you are well aware, in July 2020, the Korean government announced the Korean New Deal. This was in order to overcome the pandemic crisis and to lead the global action against structural changes with the international community. Based on employment and social safety nets, the Korean New Deal focuses on digital New Deal and Green New Deal with great effect for employment and social safety net. And we can see the commitment and plan for the Green New Deal in this slide. Including Korea, many countries around the world have declared to be net zero by 2050. This carbon neutrality is being established as the new global normal. In December 2020, the Korean government announced its 2050 carbon neutrality strategy. The 5 basic elements are expand the use of clean power and hydrogen across all sectors, improve energy efficiency in an innovative way, commercial deployment of carbon removal and other future technologies, like scaling up the circular economy to improve industrial sustainability and enhancing carbon sinks. And in May 2021, under the president, a carbon neutrality committee has been established that directly reports to the president and reviews the achievements towards carbon neutrality. And we also enacted the Framework Act on Carbon Neutrality in September 2021 for entry into effect next March. Under the 2050 carbon neutrality strategy, there is no clear set of roles of ODA projects, but under the Framework Act on Carbon Neutrality, there are international cooperation and the importance of international cooperation and the government's commitment to expand such cooperation for climate action with partner nations. As mentioned earlier, the Green New Deal focuses on policies and strategies for a low-carbon, eco-friendly economy. The P4G Seoul Summit and Seoul Declaration, as well as the keynote speech at the G7 climate session, are some of the examples of showing the commitment of the government for carbon neutrality and our intent to encompass both developed and developing nations in our efforts towards carbon neutrality. And in the same line, this July, in terms of ODA, the government established and announced the Green New Deal ODA strategy. From 2015 to 2019, in the green area, Korean government's ODA investment out of total was only 10%. And our goal is to raise that to from 20% to at least DAC average level, and we have focused on enhancing livelihoods of inhabitants and solving imminent issues in partner countries such as water resources management, waste management, anti-desertification, and sea debris management. And we also contributed to the establishment of green-related international organizations such as GGGI and AFOCO, or Asian Forest Cooperation Organization, and we also hosted the headquarters of the GCF. However, if we compare globally our share of green ODA over the past 5 years, the number is 19.6% compared to the average OECD DAC at 28.1%. Korea has great room for improvement. And each year, the green ODA of Korean government is not made consistently. And you can see in this graph on the right that the green ODA has been implemented with fluctuations. So, with the recently announced Green New Deal ODA strategy, the Korean government aims to raise the share of green ODA to at least the level of the average of OECD DAC. The specific number has not been presented yet, but if you look at the OECD DAC average, which is surpassing 30%, and different nations are announcing plans to expand their green ODA. So against this backdrop, Korea's target could be reaching 40%, which is quite ambitious. These are the details of the Green New Deal ODA strategy. The goal of this strategy is to lead the global carbon neutrality, and we have 3 strategies. First, strengthening support for the green transition of partner countries. Among the green ODA, we want to boost the share of green ODA. And we also will foster knowledge sharing and stakeholder engagement for partner countries' green transition in terms of policy, green technologies, and so forth. Different strategies and plans establishment will be supported, and we will also provide capacity building to that end so that our partner countries can reinforce their soft power. And we will also develop a flagship project tailored to the needs of partner countries. Secondly, is to perform a leading role in strengthening global cooperation for the Green New Deal. Global Green ODA initiative will be led by the Korean government. At the COP26, the president himself announced Korea's commitment and plan to expand the initiative of the Global Green ODA. And through multiple opportunities, Korea will take stronger leadership in this front. And Korea will also increase contributions to GGGI or AFOCO and other international organizations that specialize in green growth, so that Korea will strengthen its role in the green growth area. And for other organizations that does not specialize in green growth, UN agencies and multilateral development banks will also be engaged with Korea more strongly through expanded partnership. And the last strategy is driving the mutually prosperous partnership with partner countries. So we will support the priority sector based on the needs of partner countries, especially where we have our strengths. And green mobility, eco-friendly clean mobility, smart agro system, eco-friendly renewable energy will be some of the key and notable sectors. Korea is also unrolling new southern policy or northern policies, and green ODA strategy will be aligned with these types of strategies. And we will also maximize the impact of partnership by following up with ongoing and completed projects. And in particular, the Korean government understands that there are grant or loan offering agencies and projects, and the Korean government is very emphasizing the need to link these two different agencies and to go beyond the public sector and reach the private sector and engage the private sector and other international organizations in partnerships. Based on this line of the government's commitment, KOICA wants to expand the Green New Deal and advance the Green New Deal ODA strategy. Last year, within KOICA, we established by the Department of Climate Crisis and Pandemic Response for a systematic approach towards the pandemic and the climate crisis, and we are establishing more detailed strategies and plans. So we came up with the midterm strategy for climate action from 2021 to 2025. Established this year, we have 12 different sectoral strategies and cross-sectoral strategies. And regarding the green sector, this strategy will be the overarching one. Here it is. The vision is to limit the rise in global average temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius and a planet safe from the climate crisis. Our mission is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 and support climate resilient development. We have 3 strategic objectives and programs. These are the details of the strategic objective and programs. The first strategic objective is to support the achievement of carbon neutrality by 2050 for low carbon transition of partner countries. We have some specific programs such as distribution and spread of low carbon renewable energy, mostly PV, that can replace fossil fuels in power generation. This is our focal point of our program, and we also will distribute and spread the eco-friendly green mobility, promote resource circulation economy such as waste management, and create carbon sinks such as forests. In general, in the global community, adapting to the climate crisis and reducing GHG emissions, and also two areas, mitigation and adaptation, are the key areas in providing support for climate crisis. And Korea is giving much more support for adaptation. Last week at the 26th COP, one of the key conclusions was that by 2025, advanced nations will double the support for the adaptation to climate change by partner countries, because currently the support is more geared towards mitigation. And for KOICA, we have provided 30% of our support for mitigation and 70% for adaptation. Of course, we plan to expand our support for adaptation, but we will focus more on the mitigation sector because our support so far has been smaller in that direction. So we aim to launch many programs to support mitigation. And we will find more flagship projects to support mitigation of partner countries. The second objective is support for green recovery and climate adaptation. In terms of urban climate resilience, we want to help our partner countries to increase their capacity. And help ecosystem recovery and mitigation of natural disasters due to climate change. And we will also support the mainstreaming of consideration of the impact of climate change in the process of considering all the projects and implementing them. So at KOICA, we have the Environment Society Safeguard, meaning that when we review different projects in different sectors, we have the Environment Society Safeguard as a guideline and standard to screen out the projects, to make sure that our projects do not have negative social impact or an environmental impact. So this is the primary screening filter for us. And the final objective is increasing green climate partnership. In terms of finance or technical sides, we want to expand multilateral partnership. More specifically, we want to promote projects linking GCF or Green Climate Fund because KOICA has recently been acquired accredited entity status from GCF. So we want to link GCF accredited entities and funds and also help develop and spread innovative green climate technologies with our ongoing programs. And we want to expand such efforts, and we want to work with other partner entities both at home and abroad so that we can develop ODA projects that can be more helpful to our partner nations. This year, there has been a milestone event for KOICA. We have been, as mentioned earlier, approved as the GCF accredited entity in July this year, and the official announcement is yet to come. But currently, all the review process is coming to an end. GCF is the largest, has the largest green fund in the world, and in order to receive funding from GCF, an entity must be approved as an accredited entity. KDB was the first in Korea to receive this approval, and KOICA is the second one in Korea. Export-Import Bank and SK Securities, I believe, are also preparing this process. As an accredited entity, KOICA will have national direct access. So that means KOICA has national direct access for its projects. It will receive funding from GCF in terms of grant for small-scale projects up to $50 million. We can pursue medium environmental social risk projects, category B or C projects, meaning that our projects must have little or no environmental and social risk. And in order to finalize the approval, we need to sign an accreditation master agreement, which will be signed early 2022. The fact that we have been accredited as such is significant because we have access to not only KOICA funds, but an external fund from GCF, which will enable us to pool the funding from KOICA inside KOICA and also the external pool of GCF funds. The Korean government has declared to contribute $300 million to the GCF as well, which is quite a large share. And Korean entities such as KOICA to receive GCF funding to work with other Korean partner entities to pursue projects in partner nations is a very significant achievement. KOICA's current management and organization, I believe, has been recognized to be on par with the global international organizations through this approval. Before we were accredited as such, KOICA has been working with GCF through indirect cooperation projects. Using GCF and KOICA, well, the funding was not mixed from KOICA and GCF, but GCF-funded projects were worked on with KOICA in Peru, Vietnam, Guatemala, and Fiji. So that ultimately means the budget of KOICA and GCF were combined to roll out a larger project on the field. Let me introduce one example. Fiji Agro PV project was rolled out with $8 million from KOICA, 5 million in terms of loans from GCF, and 1 million from the Fijian government, and 2 million of private equity. A total of $16 million worth of PV plant, and also a sustainably operable crop and farming research was also done in tandem. So this project began this year, and similar models will be expanded in the future. Finally, our way forward, as mentioned before, in step with the government's commitment, KOICA aims to expand green ODA programs. With the accreditation from GCF, we will pursue further projects with GCF. And other than GCF, we will also pursue our own projects in green ODA programs, which will be further boosted in the future. The quality and quantity of the projects will be raised, and for all KOICA projects, we will give full consideration to mitigating climate change. Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you, Dr. Lee-Hyun-soo. You mentioned the ODA strategy of Korea and KOICA's green action and climate action.
Next, we will be inviting Dr. Park Jun-hyun of KEI to talk about enhancing Korea-ASEAN cooperation on environment and climate change. Good morning. As have been introduced, I am Park Jun-hyun of KEI. For the benefit of those who are connecting from overseas, I would like to present in English.
So I'd like to get started with my presentation on enhancing Korea-ASEAN cooperation on environment and climate change. My presentation consists of two parts. The first part is on sharing some of the key findings from the research that we have conducted at KEI and the study on development cooperation and on environment and climate change in Southeast Asia, followed by some of the key international projects at KEI and plans for cooperation in the ASEAN region. In terms of the background of our research, there is the growing need for increased international cooperation on environment and climate change. And domestically, the Korean government has been very active with various international agenda, such as the New Southern Policy. The New Southern Policy is the government's initiative where the Korean government aims to elevate the cooperation between Korea and ASEAN. And the initiative number 7 includes the enhancing of cooperation on environment and climate change for the resilience in the Southeast Asia region. And furthermore, there has been the establishment of the official government channel through the ASEAN-Korea dialogue on environment and climate change. From the Korean part, this has been hosted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the first of its meeting was held in September this year with the participation of the ASEAN Secretariat as well as the ASEAN member states joining to discuss on various environmental issues and cooperation. And furthermore, there is the Korean government's plan to double the ODA finances by year 2030, and also to increase the green ODA share, as a previous presentation from KOICA, Ms. Lee mentioned about how Korean government is aiming to match the green ODA share to that of the OECD DAC countries. So the objective of our research aim to understand some of the environmental challenges in Southeast Asia region. And we've also done some spatial analysis on the environmental issues at regional and at national levels. We've also done some analysis on some of the international cooperation from the various international organizations and key donor countries, such as Japan and France, Germany, EU. And we've also done some analysis on the Korean ODA cooperation in Southeast Asia, and finally came up with some directions and recommendations for the cooperation in environment and climate change. So to briefly share with you on some of the key findings, the or the key, some of the major issues, major environmental challenges in the ASEAN region. The ASEAN is rich, has its rich biodiversity and valuable ecosystem services. This is very well known, and it is the home to the rich terrestrial and marine biodiversity. However, a lot of these biodiversity and natural resources are under threat due to various issues, including illegal logging, traditional patterns of cultivation, construction in general, as well as urbanization. And to specify on some of these environmental challenges, firstly on the forest cover, deforestation issues. As you can see in the graph, Indonesia and Myanmar has lost approximately 22%, 27% respectively over the last 30 years in terms of their forest cover in each of their countries. And the situation is similar also in Cambodia, where we have seen a drastic decrease of the forest cover since 2010, with the forest cover decreasing from 62% to 46% over in the recent 30 years. The spatial analysis that we have done through the research also provide evidence for this forest loss in the region. If you look at the first two maps on top of the slide, there's a comparison of the gains and loss of the forest cover area in the ASEAN region. And as you can see, there's far more forest loss areas compared to the forest gain areas throughout the 20-year time frame. In terms of the spatial analysis of the air quality, the analysis showed that the annual average concentration of PM2.5 exceeds the WHO recommended air quality guideline levels, and this is causing a serious threat to the population, the health of the ASEAN population. And in terms of climate change vulnerability, the German Watch ranks the Global Climate Risk Index annually. And of the top 10 countries in the list includes 4 of the ASEAN countries, including Myanmar, Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, due to its high death tolls and high economic losses from the climate change-induced natural disaster. And the increasing CO2 emission per capita is also a concern at global and regional level. Although the CO2 emission per capita is a fractional amount compared to that of the developed countries, the continuous rise, the increasing rate, is something that is alarming at the regional level. So this table summarizes all of the different environmental issues, environmental challenges in the region in the 7 thematic areas, including nature and biodiversity, marine, water resources, cities, climate change, air pollution, waste. I do not have enough time to go over on each of the details, but you can refer to this by looking into our publication, Environmental Sustainability in Asia publication, which I will be introducing to you later in my presentation. In terms of the analysis of the development cooperation trends in Southeast Asia, we have done some analysis of the different countries, donors, as well as international organizations and the MDBs working in the region on environment. And Japan, for instance, they are by far the largest ODA donor for environment and climate change cooperation with ASEAN, working on areas related to climate change and biodiversity, waste management. And they've been having the ASEAN-Japan Dialogue Environment Cooperation since year 2007. So this is, Korea just started the dialogue, and we are already 13, 14 years behind that of the cooperation between Japan and ASEAN. US, Germany, they're working actively on issues related to climate change, nature conservation, biodiversity. China, they have, although they are not one of the OECD DAC countries, they've been working with the ASEAN through the China-ASEAN Environmental Cooperation Center since 2011, working on areas related to green growth and environmental education. The UN, ADB, and the World Bank also, they are active in the region, working on issues related to climate change, air pollution, haze management, and waste management, and so forth. And and looking into this following graph, this is the aggregated ODA volume to ASEAN on environment and climate change based on the OECD Rio markers. This is the aggregated volume of the ODA recipient countries of the 6 ASEAN member countries, including Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And as I mentioned earlier, Japan is by far the largest contributor in terms of the ODA volume to the ASEAN region in the time frame of 2015 to 2019, and followed by Germany, France, and the U.S. And the previous presentation from Koika mentioned how the Korea's Koika's ODA is primarily focused. 70% of the climate-related ODA is focusing on the climate change adaptation issues, and this graph also clearly illustrates how a lot of the focus of the Korean ODA is targeted towards the climate change adaptation and less so to mitigation and biodiversity issues. In terms of Korea's ODA to ASEAN in general, the ODA statistics stood at $473 million in 2019, which is double the figure from 2010, with the main sectors including education at 31%, public administration 25%, and technology, environment, and energy standing at 15%. And in Korea, we have what is known as the country partnership strategies for all of the ODA partners around the world. And for the 6 ASEAN countries, the country partnership strategies, the second phase of the CPS, the priority areas included the water management and sanitation issues and few contents related to climate change. And as a result of such strategies, you can see that these strategies have been well delivered, as we can see that most of the projects, ODA projects from Korea to the ASEAN region focus on the water issues. There has been a total of 68 ODA projects related to environment and climate change in the time frame of 2016 to 2021. And around half of those have been focusing on water issues and a few related to climate change. And only 6 projects related to biodiversity and marine, few on cities, 1 on air, and 9 on waste management issues. And in terms of the green ODA share, the previous presentation from Koika also mentioned of how the Korean government is aiming towards matching the level of the other OECD DOC countries for the green ODA. Looking into the projects that have been done in year 2021, we can see that the environment-related projects only accounted for 4.5% for the case of Myanmar, and for countries such as Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, ranging from 13 to 15%. So there's definitely more room for additional budget funding and additional projects in the ASEAN region. So finally, in terms of the directions for cooperation, there has been a lot of discussion on how it is important to secure the finances, basically to scale up Korean government's green ODA, and this has been discussed in the second presentation from Koika and from my presentation as well, and also on the facilitating access to other funds such as the Green Climate Fund. We were informed in the previous presentation on how the Koika has been the accredited entity to the GCF, and there can be a lot of cooperation and a lot of co-financing between these 2 institutions. And in terms of strategic planning, what is important is mainstreaming and the integration of environment and climate change related cooperation into the Korea's CPS, as well as the priority development cooperation priorities of the recipient countries. The Korean CPS, the 3rd phase is drafted at the moment, and we are hoping that a lot of the environmental issues align to the same 7 thematic areas of biodiversity, marine, water, cities, air, and waste and climate change are included into the Korean CPS for the ASEAN countries. Also, developing capacities is very important, and obviously the in-depth capacity building for technical support in partnership with various key institutions. And finally, the greening all aspects of development cooperation, such as the sustainable infrastructure development, minimizing all of the climate risks, and also a comprehensive life cycle assessment, avoiding any forms of environmental impacts in the region. Moving on, I'd like to briefly discuss with you or share with you on some of KEI's projects and plans for cooperation in the ASEAN region. This is the Environmental Sustainability in Asia publication that we've been working on since 5 years ago. We have this publication basically provides understanding of some of the environmental challenges in the region and seek for the cooperation opportunities. We've had the previous series publications focusing on countries of Vietnam and Cambodia, and this current ESA publication that we are working on is focusing on the development cooperation in the ASEAN region, pretty much what I have discussed earlier in my presentation. And the full version of the publication will be available end of this year. KEI is also very active in promoting cooperation at various levels and building capacities in the developing countries. We have hosted the Asia Pacific Environmental Innovation Challenge together with the Ministry of Environment, and we have participants in the ASEAN region, such as Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, joining in as one of the participants to the challenge. And the challenge basically aimed to provide or support capacities in developing innovative solutions to addressing some of the environmental issues in the region. We have also what is known as the KEI's e-learning center. The KEI e-learning center is primarily focused on nurturing environmental experts for the Korean population. However, since 2015, we've been working abroad, working with our international partners in building capacities and raising awareness in the developing countries. And all of our e-learning contents are free of charge, available on our website. We have also hosted the first KEI's Korea ASEAN Roundtable discussion on environment and climate change, including the ASEAN Secretariat as well as almost all of the ASEAN member state government officials, to discuss on some of the strategic directions and emerging issues and share some of the practices on environmental cooperation. And we are hoping to have this roundtable discussion as an annual event, discussing on some of the various issues to provide a bridge for science policy interface. And this is the picture of our first roundtable discussion held as a special session during the 4th UNEP's Forum of Ministers and Environmental Authorities of Asia and the Pacific. In terms of our plans for cooperation in the region, I have already mentioned about the Korea's Green New Deal ODA strategy and the ASEAN-Korea Dialogue on Environment and Climate Change. And furthermore, there has been the summit between the ASEAN and the Korean government in October 2021. It was the 22nd ASEAN-Korea summit. And the joint statement from this summit, it has specified on the cooperation of climate change, biodiversity as one of the potential cooperation areas between the two entities. And against such backdrop, we are in the process of drafting a proposal for ODA funding starting at year 2023 for the establishment of ASEAN-Korea Green Cooperation Center for technical assistance and consultation on policies and strategies related to green transition, climate response, and environment in general at regional and at bilateral national levels. And we'll also be supporting capacities and engaging with various private sectors and think tanks in the region for the green transition in the ASEAN region. And we are hoping to work together with various partners, and the ASEAN Secretariat, obviously, and the ASEAN member state is very important. And for the development of this joint program on environment and climate change cooperation, tapping on to the available ODA grants of the Korean government. And this is the final slide of my presentation. And obviously, in terms of partnership for this cooperation center, ASEAN Secretariat as well as the ASEAN member state, and KEI will be at the core of this cooperation. The KEI includes 4 research groups and 2 centers devoted on various environmental-related issues and sustainability. And we will be also working together with the various research institutes under the National Research Council. Many of these research councils, the research institutions under the NRC, are currently having sessions throughout this conference, and we are hoping to work together with them in specific green transition-related issues. And we will also be working together with the Ministry of Environment and its affiliated institutions, as well as KOICA, GGGI, and many international organizations and think tanks in the region for the green transition in the ASEAN region. Thank you very much.
네, 박준현
Thank you very much, Dr. Chunyeon Park, for your presentation. You have made a very interesting proposal at the very end, the ASEAN-Korea Green Climate Cooperation Center. That would be a very interesting proposal. We will be connecting our panelists from overseas later on in the discussion session, and I believe that this will be discussed within our framework. Let us now go into the discussion.
And for this session, we would like to invite 3 designated panelists. First, we have Professor Moon Tae-hoon from Jungang University, and we have from GGGI, Ms. Katerina Sinjalakis. And from the ASEAN Secretariat, we'd also like to invite Mr. Bong Sok. So I would like to ask the panelists and presenters to come forward and take your seats.
자, 그럼 먼저 첫 번째 토론을
And for the first discussion, I'd like to invite Professor Moon Tae-hoon from Jungang University. You have the floor.
네, 반갑습니다.
Good morning. I am Moon Tae-hoon from Jungang University. How much time do I have? 5 minutes? Okay. Thank you, Dr. An, for your presentation.
Concerning the 70 or so experts, you have conducted your expert survey on the impact of COVID-19 in the 4 main policy areas. And based on that survey, you have come up with policy suggestions. I completely agree with your policy suggestions, but along with those suggestions, I would like to point out some factors that we could consider. In order to overcome the impact of COVID-19, many efforts are being made in Korea and around the world in terms of policies. And if we take a look at response to COVID-19, we need to first take a look at our understanding of COVID-19, because depending on our understanding, our response can be very different. We have to take a look at 3 different perspectives. First, COVID-19 up until now had issues with our economic development methods, and COVID-19 actually provided a turning point to change the direction of our economic development. But as to the detailed directions, I think there are 3 different opinions. So COVID-19 has provided a turning point to transform our system. And the first direction is to have a technology-based approach to advanced development. That would be the first perspective. Well, many people have talked about this. The technologies related to the fourth industrial revolution, such as AI and the spread of computers or IoT, robots, these would be new technologies for the fourth industrial revolution to achieve not only net zero, but also to transform the global systems to trigger a new round of development in the world economy. And second, as Dr. An has mentioned, a second group of people approach this issue from the sustainability perspective. And so we take a look at society, environment, and economy together to come up with a balance for sustainability. Another extreme perspective, well, I don't think I can call it extreme, but another perspective is that up until now, the method of economic development and the capitalistic market is being criticized. A prime example would be the well-known donut economy, about which many people read through her books. And in 2008, we have gone through the global economic crisis, and so there is a sustainability report that has been launched, and they actually titled their report as Prosperity Without Growth, which means that if we do not radically change the current economic system, then we will not be able to overcome the side effects of overheated competition within our economy. And an ecosystem economist called Humandali talks about statistic economics. And so you can see that there are three different perspectives related to the future direction of economic development. I believe that the first perspective and the third perspective are quite progressive. And in between is the perspective based on sustainable development. We have always talked about sustainable development, and if we take a look at the trends of the rhetoric, we can see that we are looking for a new motivation for economic growth, and we have always focused on a new motivation for economic growth. But degrowth and ecological development have not been emphasized along these lines. And so, in order to overcome COVID-19, we have to come up with an interpretation of COVID-19 itself. And I think in interpreting COVID-19, we have talked about the first and second perspective quite a bit, but we have not been able to listen to the voice of the third perspective. And so I would like to mention two things. From a theoretical perspective, we have to take a look at the theoretical impact of COVID-19 on our policies. We all agreed to this. But the scientific and rational policies that we have created are now being developed to cooperative policies. And we can see that through this transformation, we could have more dialogue with the stakeholders in order to create a better society and better set of policies. COVID-19 actually provided the grounds for this to be possible through social capital. So such participation of the stakeholders is possible through social assets, and this is based on trust. We did not have many opportunities to meet because of COVID-19. We have less opportunities for communication, and therefore such meetings have become much more difficult than the past. And we have had strong government intervention, and the impact of the influence of companies became larger as well. So in this time, we need the strong leadership of the nation, but at the same time, we also have to take a look at how to maintain our democratic processes and keep in check the growing influence of private companies. So I believe that that will be a very important direction for theoretical research in the future. And concerning the third perspective, the very progressive perspective that I mentioned, I would like to reiterate this perspective. Up until now, we have tried to achieve economic development through market economy principles. But market economy has a very wide spectrum. The neoliberalistic economic model of the US is based on fierce competition. So some countries opt for that, but in Europe, they also have a very moderated market economy. And so Dali and Leywards are some of the scholars who have a very European perspective. The economy that we are striving to achieve did contribute to enhancing the quality of life, but we have gone beyond a certain threshold, and so the economy actually is not contributing to enhancing the quality of life, but it's actually bringing down the quality of life. Economic growth models based on excessive consumption must be reviewed so that we move in the direction of not deconsumption, but radically reducing our consumption. This would propel us to the direction of service-based economy rather than manufacturer-based economy. Up until now, money was something that was utilized for different purposes based on the principle of interest. And so, for example, if we invest in sustainable development projects, at times it was not profitable, and therefore we would lose that investment to non-sustainable development projects. And so we now need to fundamentally change our perspective so that we go in the direction of reducing consumption overall. That is the kind of awareness that we need to reflect in our vision and policies for the future. If we do not achieve this change, then our responses to climate change and the environment would be quite impossible according to the third perspective. It's very difficult for me to take a deep dive into their ideas at this point in time, but as we are responding to sustainable development, we have to take a look at what triggered COVID-19, and we have to review the social and economic systems that we have in place from various aspects and take a look at whether or not we have excessive consumption in our society. We have to take a look at ways to move towards a society that reduces consumption. And so, even if we have low growth rates, I believe that we can enjoy prosperity within the framework of low growth. And that is why we have to take a look at prosperity without growth, or donut economy. So this would be achieving qualitative growth rather than quantitative growth. GDP growth should not be our ultimate goal. We should include various ideas in the concept of growth. That is what I would like to share today. Thank Thank you.
네, 문태웅 교수님 감사합니다.
Thank you, Professor Moon. You mentioned that the implications of COVID-19 to us and what message we can get from the whole COVID-19 situation. And next, I'd like to invite from GGGI, Ms. Katerina Singelakis. Yes, she is calling in all the way from Fiji. Hello.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure. Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak at the 2021 Global Korea Convention, and many thanks to the Korea Environment Institute. As you mentioned, I'm based in Suva in Fiji. And as was mentioned in one of the presentations, I'd like to start off by saying that Fiji is also one of the countries like Korea that has committed to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. That commitment was made in 2018, and the Global Green Growth Institute, this is one of the projects we did with the government of Fiji. We assisted in the development of with the Ministry of Economy of Fiji for their development of their low emission development strategy. So in the Pacific, that's the kind of leadership on and trying to set the example for the world that the Pacific Island countries are trying to do. And that's the kind of partnership that is being developed with the government of Korea as well, and with KOICA through many projects that are happening in the Pacific and the cooperation, the international cooperation in the Pacific towards the green transition and green growth. I'll give a few examples of those as I discuss some of the topics that have been brought up in the presentations today. I'd like to start just briefly with the COVID-19 situation. Obviously, I'm going to give a Pacific Islands perspective. I've been here in the Pacific for 15 years, working on renewable energy and green growth, and I've been to all the Pacific Island countries. Of course, we have not been able to do any travel in the last 2 years, and the Pacific Island countries have been very hard hit by COVID-19. Maybe not as severely from a health perspective. Many countries have been able to keep the virus out or limit it in its spread. But however, this has been at the cost to the economies of the countries, a very severe cost, with the debts of the countries increasing very much to try and respond for the health respond to the COVID crisis. So, many apart from the health implications, many jobs have been lost. And of course, the tourism-reliant countries have suffered particularly, such as Fiji, Vanuatu, Palau, Samoa, Tonga, and others. So it has been difficult, COVID-19, and there's still there's a need for support. And there is a worry in the Pacific that ODA will be impacted when actually it's needed more than ever for the recovery from COVID-19, but also for the green transition, because that's linked with the COVID recovery, and the green transition is also linked to adaptation to climate change, which is the other big priority. But also, in line with what we heard in the presentation about the reactions to COVID-19, there have been some positive effects also here, such as a lot of advancement in how technology is used, a lot of advancement and new ideas on digitization, and a lot of public and private sector taking what for the Pacific is a leap into digitization of many services. And that's been very, very positive. So there's still a lot of potential there. And I think that's a key area that can help across the economy. Energy, transport, tourism, everything can benefit from innovation in technology and digital applications. I'd also like to touch upon what one of my fellow discussants had just commented on, that we have, the Pacific with COVID-19, it's caused a rethink around not the green transition, but specifically the tourism industry, and how the quality tourism, perhaps even fewer tourists, might be more important than expanding the tourism industry as it opens up now. and what role can sustainable tourism, ecotourism play? And a lot of people saying it should play a much greater role. That tourism can be used for the economy to recover, but also as a key tool in protecting and conserving the unique ecosystems of the Pacific, and also promoting Pacific culture and using traditional knowledge in the Pacific for a very people-centered approach to tourism and also in general to economic recovery. So having said that, I'd like to say a few words about the international cooperation where, of course, for the Pacific Island countries, I think at COP26, it was very clear that for developing countries, adaptation is a very big priority. And that's, of course, the case for Pacific Island countries. But they've also made very ambitious commitments for mitigation. At the same time, socioeconomic sectors like energy, transport, health and education, and others still need support for development. So that's very important aspects that have to go, hand in hand with the green transition. The Global Green Growth Institute has 5 member countries in the Pacific: PNG, Vanuatu, Fiji, Kiribati, and Tonga. But we're working almost across all the countries on projects such as, including on projects with KOICA, such as the Taveuni Island Solar and Battery Project, which is a combined solar and hydro utility scale plant, and also the Ovalau agro-photovoltaic project, which was mentioned earlier. And there's an enormous potential. I saw that the work here is very aligned to the aims of KOICA and the Korean government's cooperation areas, such as e-mobility, nature-based solutions, including wetlands and mangrove ecosystems. And I think in supporting those kind of projects, we're also supporting the high ambition of the Pacific Islands in their national determined contributions and their low emission development strategies. So there's a lot of potential there's a need for mobilizing more investment into those areas, including public, but also private finance. And GGI is currently working on a regional sustainable transport e-mobility project, and looking for partnerships in that area. We're working with Fiji, PNG, Tonga, and Kiribati on that project. Just a few more words from me. I guess from the perspective of adaptation, GGI is now working with a number of with our development partners and the countries on nature-based solutions, looking particularly around how to protect coastal areas. About 90% of the population of the Pacific live near the coast, so they're very vulnerable to climate change. And that's where economic development, livelihoods, and as well ecosystem protection can come together to decrease the vulnerability of those people. So 3 key areas that we're looking at, I think align very well with what's already been said today, is investing and protecting marine protected areas, investments into urban and peri-urban coastal infrastructure using nature-based solutions, and also protecting the reefs and reducing waste and pollution and promoting the circular economy. So how can we not stop the economic development, because that's needed for the green transition, for the recovery, but providing the cooperation, technical assistance, and expertise to be able to switch products so that they're local products, so that they can be manufactured locally using natural components that can biodegrade, and therefore boost jobs, boost the economy, but also reduce plastic waste and pollution flowing into the oceans and destroying those coastal livelihoods. So those are the few words that I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
네,
Thank you very much, Ms. Katerina, for your words. You represented the Pacific region and your various efforts taking place in the Pacific. Going forward with Pacific Island states, I think Korea will fully cooperate, and we have great expectations for cooperating with GGGI as well. I think that was the gist of your message. And next, from the ASEAN Secretariat, we have Mr. Bong Sok, Head of Environment Division.
Thank you very much. I think while I'm taking the floor first, on behalf of our ASEAN Secretary, I would like to express our sincere thanks to the organizer, the National Research Council for Economic, Humanity, and Social Science, organizing this sort of Global Korea Convention 2021, and particular thanks to the Korea Environment Institute, organize this special session on the green transition and international cooperation. I think one of the good time for us to reflect what's going on. I mean, it's not only the COVID-19, but I mean the other international commitment that we have to come together and do things, make things different. For example, the COP15 CBD that also going on, that some of the post-2020 biodiversity sort of framework, and also the nature-based solution that also been highlighted in that sort of COP15. And recently, the COP26 with a lot of commitment, both from financial standpoint, from technology transfer for adaptation and mitigation. However, to translate those policy commitment pledge into action, there's something that more need to be done in terms of the way how we work together, how we work within ourselves. So I think, I mean, I really impressed by the presentation made by the speaker. I think, you know, the Korean SDG finding and the KOICA Korean Green New Deal strategy, as well as the presentation and a recommendation from Dr. Jun Hoon Park, that is including the proposal for consideration as in ASEAN-ROK Green Cooperation Center. It's quite excited, but I mean, with that, I think it's well aligned with what is the president of KI just said about we need to balance. I mean, it's not only think one side and forget another, or one group and forget another group. So we need to work together as the way how we can balance our society. So I think with that, I would like to share quick on the on my view on COVID-19. I think some of you already highlight, also the panelists present that COVID-19 and the finding from the survey of Korean SDG. One of the most exciting things about the impact of that in terms of positive and negative. Of course, from environmental perspective, some of them are positive, but of course, some of them are, a few of them are negative as well in terms of food consumption, food waste, and also in terms of plastic waste or marine debris and so on. So I think this is well known, and that is the real situation. So with that, what is really mean to us? To me, COVID-19 is a testing series, a testing ground to see how we can cope with the change, with the drastic change, with the drastic impact. This, I think, to me, consider significant, but I consider somehow maybe moderate. There may be something more serious than that in the future. So, I mean, like some of the speakers highlight already, it's a turning point that for us to consider, but it's not a one turning point, it's maybe more. I mean, particularly Professor Hon just point out that it is a turning point, but I think of course, one turning point, but the magnitude for next turning point may be more serious than that. So COVID-19 is testing ground, how we can cope with that. So as you may have learned from all the material and all the communication so far, the success of the way we cope with COVID-19 is cooperation. No one have top of the gear, single sort of country, because of the thing impact from economic, from public health, from many aspects. So the collaborative approach and cooperation is really the key. So that's why I said the presentation and organization of today's event, it's the right juncture that we discuss about how we can cooperate and do more. So, I mean, this really to test how to make the real and genuine economic growth and development. You see, just only COVID-19 and impact the whole system in the world, no matter economic power or less economic power, developing country, least developing country, all it's a really impact. So the way we cope right now, because the COVID-19 vaccination and so on, that's the way we make things happen as the way we control the situation. But I believe more need to be done. With that, I would like to share with you what ASEAN doing. ASEAN have a lot of effort as well in the way of we deal with the COVID-19. For example, specifically, I mean, we have ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework and its implementation plan. So this one identify also the key sustainability in our broad strategy. We have 5 broad strategy, but I don't want to elaborate a lot because this from economic and social as well. But I mean, one of the things that in reflect to the social and environmental dimension, I think one area that is clearly spelled out in our plan of action and framework, it's about the resilient society and a greener and better sort of society where we consider social environment as an integral part of the solution. So with that, I mean, we have a number of strategic policy and paper in terms of, the energy mix and also the transport, sustainable transport, and also the 4 industrial revolution, as pointed out by Professor Hon as well, and which is part of technology solution. So we work on all of these aspects in a collaborative manner. So I think this is the way we are doing. But in the meantime, I mean, from ASEAN Secretary side, we would like also to appreciate and congratulate, I mean, for the Korean commitment for carbon neutrality and commitment to the contribution to the fund of the climate action. So this is one of the most remarkable that ROK made. I think with that, I think now not only the challenge that ROK are facing, but I mean all the countries are facing with this sort of new commitment, not only the money, but also the way we have to reshape and reframe differently economic sort of perspective and what we should do better. So I think from my personal view on the future, I think we need to identify really a genuine sort of collaborative approach and synergy effort. I mean, this one, I just would like to reiterate my point and share the same view with the presenter from KOICA, Yun Sun Lee, for the the quality, not only quantity of the ODA, of the New Green Deal and so on, of the Green New Deal and so on. So this is the way we need to further advance our quality of the ODA program, and also the way we have to promote greener and more resilient sort of project. So this will include not only limit, I mean, the way we also mainstreaming the climate change in all the project in program, that the way we can accelerate our resilient capacity. I mean, my last point, it's about the how we can cooperate. I mean, early point I said that we need to do more. I mean, of course, there's some constraint and limitation here and there in relation to the cooperation. But I think there are ways to do better for win-win, for plus rather than win-lose. So the way we promote the cooperation, it can be crucial for improve our productivity, our harmonies, and also our joy of life. And the way to cooperate here, what I mean, it's about the reason. I mean the cooperation we need to advance, because this become political. I don't want to talk through that political, but it just become more theoretical. The way we need to find its collaborative approach from individual behaviors, starting from individual behavior up to the country, how we can make the transformative change. So it's not about looking at the policy as a single sort of actor. Social cultural connection as one of the things. Start from the low-hanging fruit where we can make things more, accelerate more robust. I mean, this go to the point like some of you said about the trust. The trust can provide open conversation, can provide better sort of cooperation. Without trust, no matter how much you say cooperation, it will not come with the quality, with meaningful sort of engagement. So I believe the cooperation, it's about the way we build trust, we discuss more, and right now the policy direction there, it's about all of us to translate that in the openly manner, and also in the, in the way we can do together. It's not a competition sort of game. So it's about the way we do the thing together. So that's what I want to share about our collaborative way of doing things, that we can do better and start from the individual sort of engagement. Now come to the point of, I just want to reflect a little bit on the ASEAN-ROK cooperation. I think it's really important in order to reflect what my early point as the way we engage, not only from individual, but also from technical standpoint. So the KI, as presented by Dr. Jun Park, I think it's, I mean, from me, I would like to share the same view, like what he presented. I mean, in terms of this maybe important role of KI can advance further, promote more partnership, more engagement of different actors from ROK, and then also ASEAN Secretariat can facilitate and support in terms of connection from ASEAN side. This is the way we can promote more robust sort of cooperation between ROK and Korea, and taking opportunity, and also the Green New Deal of the Korean government, and also the triple sort of increase the ODA of Korea. So I think this may be an opportunity that we can work together, not only with the KI, but maybe that open up opportunity for KOICA and other partner, or GGI that operate in ASEAN, or any other partner, including GCF. And this may be a great opportunity that we can working together. And so in order to open this space, I think continuous dialogue is really the key. So COVID-19, it's just only the testing ground. Now we need to do more together, stronger, and this is the way we can come up more resilient, more sound, sustainable, and inclusive growth. Thank you very much.
네, 봉석 국장님.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vong Sok, for your discussion. KEI will also have an opportunity to visit the ASEAN Secretariat to meet you in person so that we can further discuss cooperation. We look forward to that opportunity.
So we heard from all three discussants, but it's already noon. I would like to give 30 seconds each to our presenter if you can say what you really need to say.
되는 거죠?
Is my microphone working? Well, Professor Moon has provided some great comments. I don't think I have anything to add, but having said that, our research is based on the expert survey to take a look at the impact of COVID-19 on Sdgs. So it actually was a survey that was quite limited in scope, and therefore the subsequent policy suggestion was also limited in scope. Professor Moon talked about the direction for sustainable society, and we do need additional dialogue to take a look at what direction we're going to choose. He talked about the 3 different perspectives, and I don't believe that the perspectives are too different from one another. I believe that all 3 perspectives are focused on is actually moving away from the economy first perspective. So it is actually adding something to economic growth in terms of priority. And so it actually is an expanded version of a similar perspective. And so I believe that in the process of discussing these perspectives, we can move towards a more sustainable society. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Katerina, for your comments. You mentioned that not only the quantitative expansion, but better quality of ODA programs will be important. And KOICA is fully aware of the points you've raised. And first of all, with our partner countries, the policy, technical sides and demands and environments must be met well. And we also will look at some of the areas where Korea has a competitive edge and therefore may make great contribution. And we are looking at projects that can be most sustainable. So these are our key areas of support, and we will continue on to work and make sure that our projects are high quality. Including Fiji, for climate vulnerable countries like the Pacific Island states, KOICA has many projects on the way, and we have many in our pipelines. GGGI and KOICA have entered into a strategic partnership, and we also concluded an agreement. And in terms of climate areas, we are together looking for promising projects. So we look forward to deeper cooperation with GGGI so that we may together help the green ODA in these climate vulnerable countries.
Thank you for your opinions. Well, through the current administration, we have continued to expand our cooperation between Korea and ASEAN. From the Ministry of Environment's perspective, we did not have many eye-catching projects in terms of cooperation with Southeast Asia. The Ministry of Environment mostly focused on projects with Northeast Asian countries such as China and Japan, and it seemed that they are leading various projects in the Northeast Asian region, but we have yet to see strong cooperation with Southeast Asia through the Ministry of Environment, and we look forward to changing these directions. Thank you very much.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you. So for the past 2 years, we have proceeded with the KEI session on green transition and international cooperation, and we have come to the end. This is the second event that we have held following last year, and we look forward to another of this session to be held next year, and I hope to see you next year back here. I would like to thank all participants who have joined us online and offline. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. And with a big round of applause, we would like to conclude this session.